behind this positioning of your book is to understand that great books are simple but not easy. And what I mean by that, and part of the reason why I think this will be a good exercise for you guys to have done, is that I want you, when people talk to you over Thanksgiving dinner and they say, hey Dustin, you're working on a book, what's it about? Early on, you probably would have sort of vomited a bunch of stuff out there and kind of waved your hands a lot, but now I think you can make the case that plays into one of the core things that's important about having a good book, in particular this idea of the tension that your book has, something that's unique and different about it, kind of the bigger idea that you have, and some of the core early sort of credibility and evidence that you have for it. So that's kind of the idea at this point. If you had some awkward early conversation with family members about what does this mean you're writing a book, what do you know, now at least you should be able to make the case behind it. Now, to understand this core thing to know is that a simple but not easy premise is not easy to do, and that's why one of those things that the introduction is so important to put together. So one of the things I'll show you guys just a little bit here, just to give you an example. This is, again, the big idea document that we have, the template. So all of you have either done it or are in the position of doing it here. It really is designed to kind of mimic a little bit of what you would see if you were doing a book proposal for a publisher. That's sort of the idea behind it. So it's really meant to strip out some of the pieces that don't necessarily play into it, but really focus on the core parts behind it. So that's some of the things you've been doing here. Now, as you fill this document out, you'll recognize there's holes in it and you'll recognize things you need more of. This is kind of a living document, so you'll continue to work on this with your editor. And in fact, when you even go into revisions, I oftentimes see the editor authors pick this back up. So I picked on Matt Henry just because he has done this before, but I shared a little bit of his document. The key thing to do that I'd recommend is after you have your positioning call with me, is to go back through and update things. So Matthew went back in and kind of changed some things, tweaked some things a little bit along the way. But this should be living and breathing. Again, it's a place for you to have conversations about, show people about, and fill in things as you go. Now the goal, for those of you who have not yet done your positioning call, is to come out of this having two big pieces that you sort of at least had a discussion with me about. The first one is your introduction structure. So how do we actually make the case? And as we'll talk about more today, the introduction itself has these sort of 7 core elements. And so my goal for you is to sort of help you listen to your words, what you've said to me, and sort of say, is there a way for us to take those thoughts and the research and the things you've written down and sort of play them back to you in a way that makes this argument. So you'll see that it is a little, in some ways formulaic. Your introduction has a flow to it based on what I share with you. That said, you should feel comfortable to change it, tweak it, to make the case that you want to make in that regard. So the second thing that we really try and do, or I try and do at these calls, is sort of take and sort of say, is there a way that we can start to structure things? So based on what you've written and shared, is there a way that the book makes the case in general? Now, the key thing to understand here as well is you oftentimes will get off these calls with me, and you'll be like, yes, this makes perfect sense. And then you'll look at it about 4 hours later and what the hell did we talk about again? What happened there? Because it's a little bit a lot comes at you fast, which is why I make sure you record it so you can look back on it. But understand, this is not necessarily a prescriptive, you must structure your book this way. Again, I take what you say and try to play it back to you in a way that kind of makes logical sense. So this is not necessarily to sort of say, oh, Eric is telling me I have to change something, I have to go this way. My goal is to help give you a framework, but you play within it. And again, tweak things around, change things around. You will see that your structure and the way you organize things will continue to evolve over the next 10 weeks, and even more so than that over the 3 months following when you revise it. But the most important thing to know is start to think about your book. How do you make this case in this much bigger, broader way? So, core things out of this positioning call for all of you to recognize as you're going through them or as you've just finished them is the goal is to give you some more confidence in where your book might go. So hopefully now you've got this sense that there is really a book here, and if there weren't a book here, I would tell you. Right? So that's part of my goal here is to sort of say, hey listen, I think this feels like it's off track, we need to pivot around a little bit or change things, but you should have confidence. Again, my goal is to come out of this saying, is there a publishable book in this soup that we have? That's the goal of it. This is something that I think the world needs. And the same token, if I hear something I'm like, hey listen, this sounds, Adam Grant already covered this one, I don't think there's a spot for it, that's okay, we'll tweak in those ways. For the most part, most of you have done a terrific job of being able to find your niche in your card coordinate. Second thing is sort of to give yourself some more clarity on what's missing. And so we talk about some of the data and the statistics and some of the credibility. You may look at this and sort of say, wow, I didn't really touch on this part at all, or I realize I've underinvested in this one. It's great. Remember, we've got plenty of time to keep doing more interviews, to keep doing more research, to fill in those holes. So it's not to sort of say, oh gosh, I need more time. More importantly is to say, hey, this is what the next phase of this is to focus on. So if you come out of this one feeling like there's some things that I haven't done enough yet, I haven't enough interviewing, I haven't enough whatever it is, that's okay. That's part of the process to do those sorts of things. And the last thing is really to make sure you have a structure for us to think about your introduction. Now, as I said before, the introduction really makes the case for the whole book, and as you'll hear me talk about more, it really is designed to give you this way to pull the elements together so that you can use this in that way. The introduction is the document that you will send around to most people. It's one of those things when you're looking for book blurbs, early book reviewers, and all those sorts of things, you will share this a lot, so we will invest a lot of time in it because it really does set the stage for the entire rest of the book.